Hi, I'm Michael Killen, and several years ago, I discovered the artist David Park. What I mean by discover, I noticed his work, friends of mine were talking about it, and recently, I have had this feeling that this California artist who came on the scene after World War II was gaining more and more fame, and that right now there is a resurgence of interest in him. And that motivated me to invite his daughter, Helen Park Bigelow, to come on this program and share insights of her life with him, and to also invite Francis Hackett. He is the owner of Hackett Mill, and he also represents the state of David Park. He's a man who obviously has lots of insights into David Park. I'm going to start the show by asking Francis a few questions. Am I correct? Is there a resurgence of interest in David Park?
I would say that there isn't so much of a resurgence, more of an in-depth look and passionate journey into his world and his body of work. There has always been. It has become only more stronger because it is, David Park for me is and his paintings are a rarefied form of art making today, where an artist is able to explore oil pigment and the media of painting on canvas and works on paper to tap into, discover his own soul. And it is an art form that has become more rare, and thus it becomes something that is more of interest for the public.
Okay, I'd like to bring up one photo of his work, and maybe you could help us further appreciate the work. And as I'm waiting for the photo, I'd like to know, what does it mean that you represent the estate of David Park?
First of all, to exclusively represent the estate of David Park is an honor and privilege.
Just a second. Can we have that photo again? And what are we looking at here? And what do you see? You're the expert.
We're looking at a hand of an artist that has masterfully, in the mid-1950s, explored oil pigment and married it with an emotional response to the subject. This is a portrait of Lydia, his wife, sewing. These are scenes, everyday scenes that he was remembering and looking at home. And when you look at this work, you really see his brilliance as a painter, because you look at the economy of brushwork, look at how the dressed form is depicted, and the few markings that actually caress the contours of her. Look at the light, look at the space that he's created that is uniquely to him and his world.
And that's very good. But what I also see is the composition. You know, the eye comes in at the bottom on the left, goes up the leg, the hip comes up to the head and goes off onto the shade of the light and down to the hand again, and it just brings you right around, which I think is wonderfully done. I interrupted you a moment ago. Briefly, what is the role of the representative of the estate of David Park?
It involves a huge responsibility. We are involved. I have to first say that the brainchild of Hackett Mill is my business partner. A equally passionate person of David Park and art is Michael Hackett, and I'm Francis Mill. And our responsibility as representatives of the estate and the works of David Park is really to build the market, protect the market, promote his work, and also it involves the ambitious undertaking right now of beginning the catalog raisonné, which we are in the beginning of the research phase, which is collecting and documenting and archiving his entire body of work for a future publication.
So you have a sense of what other galleries that may work with you what they are doing with his work?
We basically have a very ambitious exhibition that will actually focus on David's work and a few of his important contemporaries.
But I would like you to tell me, just have one more question. What is happening in the marketplace right now with respect to what I felt was a resurgence, and you refer to what's happening now?
First of all, I would like to point out that Park, of the many things that he's known for, is really about, in the post-war period, he had the guts to buck the trend.
Okay.
And because of what he did, he focused on his own convictions as to what he wanted to paint, the direction he wanted to take.
Okay.
That is what the focus is now on in terms of collectors, the public, museums, and that is part of that resurgence that you're talking about.
All right. All right. Thank you. You've been wonderful. Helen, how are you today?
Very well, thank you.
It is lovely to meet you again.
Thank you.
And I think this is our third time.
Thank you very much.
Now, you heard Francis say there is a greater depth, expansion, or whatever of interest in your father's work. What is happening? Are there retrospectives, or what's going on that makes me feel this deep expansion of interest in his work?
There will be a retrospective, probably in 2016 or 17, at SF MoMA, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, when it reopens, or shortly after it reopens. It'll be a full retrospective of my father's work, and it will travel to 2 other venues.
Over what time period?
Probably 2 years.
Okay. So having a retrospective at SF MoMA is an important development, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
And I was wondering, I mean, we all have parents and children, and we all sometimes think about how our children feel about our success, and they probably think of, okay, all of that. How do you feel? I know you've written a couple of books, including this book. Can I get a photo of it? Holding Nothing Back. And I want to share, my wife read it from beginning to end,
Wonderful.
and she referred to it as a book, an art book that she really found fascinating. I think it had to do with not just the photos, which is what we always see, but also the intimate details and understanding of them. How do you feel when you walk into a museum and you see one of your father's great works, and you know 5,000 people in the next month are coming to see it? How do you feel?
That's a crowd. My answer is crowded. My mind is always crowded. My heart is crowded at those moments. I am very, very humbled and very proud and very moved to see the work. I have loved all my life eavesdropping and listening to things that other people say, and I've heard the works. I've heard everything from what is this doing in a museum? My kid could do this. To this guy's a genius. Someday everybody's going to be standing in line at the Metropolitan waiting to get into his show. I've heard the whole works, and I have listened and loved doing that. But mostly what happens when I stand close up, as close as I can get, 2 or 3 feet to one of his paintings, I'm so aware of him. I'm so deeply aware of him. I can almost smell the oil paint. He stood there, his arm went out with the paintbrush working, and I can feel it. It's very moving.
So this brings you back to your childhood and early adult years, because I know he passed very early. How old were you when he passed?
I was 27. He was 49.
27. But you and he lived together for quite a while. Okay. And so it brings you back to those days. Mm-hmm. And now, well, first of all, you said your mind gets clouded when you're there and you're thinking about
Yeah, I said crowded. It's just, there's so much happening,
So much, okay. And I wanted to take issue with you on that because I have observed you. You are a very clear thinker, okay, as well as a very creative thinker. But it gets crowded, huh?
It gets crowded. It's emotionally crowded. I long to be able to talk to him about different paintings and ask him questions I wish that I had asked when I could have, but didn't think of them then. I know everybody goes through that, but it's very, very active in me when I look at his work.
Do you have a favorite painting, one in particular that you'd like to understand what was going through his mind and what is going through his motions and the environment? Anyone come to mind?
This one that you were showing of
Mother.
Lydia sewing, that's my mother.
Oh.
And I love the way very often in his work he depicted her in a very quiet, pensive, intimate, and ordinary moment, ironing, sewing, reading. I love the way when he did not deliberately paint her, but simply painted the figure of a woman. So very often the face of that woman is my mother's face, and the hairdo is my mother's hairdo. I would love to be able to talk to him about what profound influence on him she had and her presence had.
Now, compared to him, was she a more gentle human being?
That's not a word I would have used. She was a very efficient person. She worked all the time. It was her paycheck that got us through, although he also taught school always. But the family had very, very little money. Yeah. She was responsible, and she worked, and she held everything together. But her major force was her belief in him. She believed in his work. She loved it.
Really?
She supported it. She was enthusiastic about it. I remember one day in the late 50s when his work had taken a marvelous thrust forward. She called me up one day and she said, "You got to come in here and look at this stuff. Something's going on." I mean, she was excited about his work.
So, among other things, she was a stabling force in the relationship?
She was a stable person.
Yes.
He was also.
He was?
Yeah.
Okay. But to be an artist, you're really out there sometimes.
I know you're supposed to be crazy to be an artist, but he was actually a very dependable and sane person and quite brilliant.
Okay. And he has relationships with other great artists or important artists, Stephen Korn and
Elmer Bischoff.
Were those two his closest
painter friends? Yes.
Friends.
They were the three of them were very close. And the three of them appear together in articles about Bay Area figurative painting, and any article about Elmer Bischoff or Richard Eben Korn will refer to David Park. They were an enormous influence on each other, and they cared about each other, spent a lot of time together, had drawing sessions weekly, that sort of thing.
Now I'm wondering, what influence has your father had on you?
One of the things that happened, because he had exhibitions in museums or galleries, is that from time to time he'd be asked to write something for an exhibition catalog. And one of the things that he wrote was he called out 4 words. He called them his gods, his idols. The words are vitality, energy, profundity, warmth. And I discovered those words in some brochure or wherever it is they appeared long, long ago, and they kind of stuck with me and I thought how wonderful it was to know what my father's idols were, what his gods were, that he wanted to imbue into his work. And I decided, okay, I like that.
Profundity, warmth,
energy, vitality.
And vitality. So those were sort of the principles or the elements of the framework of his thinking or emotions that helped guide him. And they became yours? Okay.
Yeah, they became mine.
Yeah. Well, that's quite interesting. I would like to digress for a moment. I'd like to go back to this book. And I know my wife bought a copy from you, and in that discussion, I found out there were just maybe a handful of copies left.
Yeah.
And if you're having a big retrospective in 2015,
Probably 16 or 17.
16, have arrangements been already made for someone to reprint this book?
It's under discussion, and I'm working on it. I want it very badly, and I'm trying to make it happen.
Yeah, I would imagine publishers who make art books, knowing that there's going to be a retrospective and probably 2 more major events following it, would find this an opportunity.
I know that the publishers who did this book, Hudson Hills Press, would have brought out another issue, but they unfortunately are, I think they're probably going under or near it. So they're not publishing anything new.
Okay, so I'd like to go back to your father again, and it has to do with his personality. It seems at some point the world was focused on abstract paintings, okay? And then he comes along, and I believe he did some abstract paintings, and he comes along and he decides to focus on the figure, okay?
Right.
And so he's bucking the trends.
Right.
And was he somebody who knew he was bucking the trends? And is he somebody like that? He's willing to charge off in his own direction regardless of the way the world is going?
What happened to him as he wrote it, and I'm paraphrasing, he went into his studio one day and he looked at all the paintings that were stacked up against the walls and all over the place in the studio. And what he saw to him looked as if it was the work of a hard-working guy who was trying to be important. And he couldn't stand that. It made him disgusted with himself. And so he packed everything up into his car and took it to the Berkeley City dump and threw it all away.
So he no longer felt he needed to try to be important. He had arrived at that.
He said, as you grow older, mind you, he was 48 at the time, as you grow older, it occurs to you that you have to do what you want to do.
Okay. One last question. When you were over in my studio, you looked at one of my paintings, and I'm paraphrasing, you corrected, and you said, I'm not doing anything like your father did. And I think you volunteered, I'm into the message when I paint. I'm really out to influence. Okay. But what did you say your father was trying to do?
I tried to express to you that he didn't paint in order to get a specific message across. I think what he painted, what he tried to do as he was painting, if he was painting a figure, if he was painting a head, he tried to paint the best head he possibly could paint. If it was a woman sitting at a table or a woman sewing, as in that painting we were looking at, he tried to make everything in that room and the feel of it and all of it be the best that it could be for its sake, not to give a message, but for its own purity.
First, I want to thank you.
You're
I find
welcome.
it an honor to have this discussion with you.
Thank you very much.
Good. I'd like to go. What advice do you have for collectors who want to expand their collection of David Park's work?
My advice would be to allow themselves to see and feel and be moved. Roberta Smith, the New York Times art critic, said it very well, that David Park is an artist that we need to see, long overdue for a retrospective. His work will light a fire under any young painter today because his work teaches us how to look, a skill that we are endangered of losing. And from my experiences, from my business partners' experiences together, We have only known collectors of Park works that are primarily very deeply passionate. There are no casual collectors of his works. People have their own personal connection with him and his soul through the work, and our best collectors have always gone deeper and deeper in their understanding of the entire movement that has been led by Park himself.
Okay, I would like to share, your organization was kind to send me 3 high-quality photos of his work. And I have to admit, I was touched when I looked at those photos. And it's truly amazing. And to me, to some extent, he's a very rich surface painter. Okay? And also, and other qualities that you point out, and again, you know, I'm moved by composition to a good extent. So I want to thank the 3 of you for being a guest on this program, and I was honored to meet all of you, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaker today is Michael Killen, who comes at this from a rather different point of view. He is a longtime TV journalist, talk show host. He has been in the media for most of his life. He's the author of several books. He's been a leader in several businesses. But sometime a decade or perhaps more ago, he started getting into sustainability and climate change. That led him to an interest in art, and to art which might somehow contribute to this very interesting and very rich debate about climate change. So today he's going to talk specifically about his latest and for me most interesting creation, which we have here before us. Michael, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you. A nice introduction. Thank you very much.